What's up everybody, Drew here. Today I'm going to do my second music theory in action video. Let's see, I'm going to do something in the house music style. Alright, so to begin, I'm first going to set up my session. I'm going to choose to work at 128 BPMs. So we're going to change our tempo. Let's hear how fast that is. Alright, cool. So as I mentioned in my textbook, linked below, if you don't have it, I would be more than honored if you grabbed a copy. I hope it helps you in your production, and a lot of the stuff I talk about, I go into more detail in the book. But as I mentioned in the book, dance music's a little bit different than some other genres because it focuses around the live presentation or the DJing aspect. Many genres of dance music are built in consistent tempos. So house music, tech house, electro house, progressive house, all these things can be slower or faster than I'm about to write, but typically our most basic BPM would be 128 beats per minute. Alright, so to begin, I'm going to create a new instrument, my default patch. I'm going to open my library. I'm going to choose a drum kit. Now, slightly different than my hip-hop video where I started with the keyboard and worked out. I think I'm going to start with the drums here, since this style of music is so rhythmically dependent. Alright, so for this, what drum machine should we use? Let's try Epic Electro. Now, in future videos I'll cover sample-based drums. I do highly recommend working from a sample-based drum ultimately, building your own samples even, but in these introductory videos I want to showcase Logic's default abilities, so I'm going to work from default Logic instruments and plugins. Alright, so let's do a control click or right click if you have one of those magic mouses. Let's double click to open up our MIDI window. Now, the drum machines in Logic are pretty cool because if I zoom in fully, we start to see what these labels, what each channel is set up to. Now, just like our pitch-based instruments, this is set up on a piano roll. It's pretty standard to have C1 be our kick drum. Alright. Now, I'm going to start by writing some of these elements. Now, I'm going to put a kick on all 4 quarter notes. Alright. This would be referred to as 4 on the floor. This is one of the basic introductory elements to house music. Now, let's turn off our metronome. Sounds a little bit full, a little bit too big. Now I just accidentally hit this drop down menu, but these drum patches are actually set up so that we have individual stem control. That's kind of cool because I could say come in here to my kick channel and add an EQ that I'm ultimately going to automate. Alright, so we're going to start out with a filtered kick sound. Alright, cool. So let's go ahead and let's create some different instances. Now, in my opinion, house music is sort of all about the build, the introduction of elements. So the second 4 bars, I'm going to add in some hi-hat here. Now, I'm going to do a simple upbeat hi-hat sound. And let's hear this in context. Alright. Copy them over. Alright, cool. We got this. Cool. Let's talk about our quantize functions. A lot of people ask me about this. We can take advantage of some swing. You'll notice if I start moving the swing, nothing happens. Why is that? Well, that's because my time quantize is set to 16th notes. I'm using an 8th note grid. In other words, I'm on 8th notes. So if I want to take advantage of my swing, I can do so with my 8th note. Moves it a little bit to the right. I can also take advantage of these other 8th type swings. Cool. We'll use that for now. I'm going to copy this pattern over. And then I'm going to add in a clap sound. So this is going to be the backbeat that I talk about in the book. Different than our hip-hop beat we did last time where we used a halftime backbeat, I'm going to use a standard full-time backbeat. Let's just use the snare. Alright, so I'm going on every 2 and 4. So if we look up here at the grid, we've got a 16th note grid. All these slightly higher check marks, or these bold lines, these are our quarter notes. So we got a 1, 2, 3, 4. So our snare is on our 2 and 4. Alright, let's hear this. Cool. So now we have 3 different instances of the actual drum beat. Let's talk about mixing our kit slightly. I could take my snare and send it to some reverb. Notice our actually bus is already built in to have this reverb. Let's do some of that with the hi-hat too. Cool. So now we've got some drums to sort of sample in there as we'd like. Let's write a piano's instance. All right, so I'm going to open up my keyboard. Now, for this, I'm going to show you basically from the project files that I create in the chapter 3 and 4, the Diatonic Chords, the key of C major. So we're going to use a major key. This is going to create more of an uplifting sort of house track. Alright, so I'm going to write in my diatonic chords. So I'm basically skipping scale tones. In the key of C major, we have all the white keys. So I'm just skipping white keys. And our final diminished. And then we would be back to 1. Alright, so these chords, if we analyze each one, we've got a C major, a D minor, an E minor, an F major, a G major, an A minor, and a B diminished. Alright, now I'm going to hold Command. That brings up our second default tool, which is a marquee tool. I'm going to now chop each measure. Alright, cool. Now I'm going to create a 4-bar chord progression by dragging one of each of these chords over. Now I'm going to put C at the end. Let's start with a D minor, an F major, an A minor. Cool. It works. Now, I've been listening to a lot of the progressive sort of trance, and like that's what I sort of would define deadmau5 music as. Forgive me, deadmau5 fans, if you prefer to call it something else. But I hear a lot of sustained sort of harmonic progressions, a lot of cool plucks and delays, and so I'm going to use some of those elements today. Alright, so I just doubled up the length of that chord progression. I can hit a Command J key command to join these clips. I could have also Control clicked and hit join. So now we have a chord progression. Alright, now we're going to duplicate this channel. Let's hit the library. Let's go into synthesizers, plucked, and let's audition different sounds. I'm going to solo this out. Ooh, crazy. Cool, that's what I'm talking about. I like that, calm pluck. Now what we're going to use is we're going to mess around with a little bit of delay. Let's see what delay we have in here. Oh, notice they have a delay fully set up already on our plucked nylon guitar, but there's no wet. That means there's no delayed signal coming back. Let's hear what happens as we raise the wet. Cool. Alright, let's duplicate this channel. Let's review something we did in the hip hop video. Let's play around with Logic's Arpeggiator. So, to do that, I can go in here to MIDI effects, click Arpeggiator, and we're going to hear this sound move. Cool. Some nice stuff there. Alright, so now I'm going to actually bounce that in place. I hit Control B. It's my quick key command. Alright, cool. Now we have what we were just listening to on an audio channel. Why did I do that? Well, we could do some various cool things. One, I could chop out a chord and I could reverse it. Let's hear what that sounds like. Pretty cool. I'm going to reverse each one of those. Alright, so to do that, I want to chop every 2 bars. That's because each one of those is when my chords change. If I were to have reversed that whole instance, what would happen is the chord progression would just be backwards. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. But because I want to use the chord progression that I originally wrote, but take advantage of the backward sound, I'm going to do what I just did. Chop each of these clips. Now I'm going to go in to File, Function, Reverse. Now I'll say this each video, but if you're trying to follow along and this is not working, you're not finding the functions I'm seeing, you need to go into Logic, Preferences, Advanced Tools, Enable All. This is going to allow for destructive editing. That's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm actually changing these audio files. Now the cool thing is these are just bounces of MIDI I have above, so I could easily just bounce in place again. Now I get this backwards. Crazy. This kind of stuff is really fun to do. Alright, I'm going to chop these every 4 bars. I'm going to shorten them so we just have essentially a quarter note. Now we're going to put some delay on it. Just tape delay. So what I did there was I auditioned various presets in Logic. This is a great way to jump between the different rhythmic delays that we have. And then I just played around with some of the character. Down here, this is the low cut, high cut. This is basically a filter that's built in on the actual delayed signal that's coming back. So I raised the low cut and I lowered the high cut to create that filtered sound of the echo back. I think it works pretty well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that all through some of our reverb. Cool. We're getting somewhere. Now notice I still have the forward version. This is going to be cool to bring in. Let me show you what this is going to sound like. We're creating layers to then arrange. So imagine second time we hear this. That'll work pretty well. Alright, since we're now getting multiple layers, let's label something. This is going to be our reversed with, let's go reverse with delay. We've got main arp. We've got plucked instrument. These are the same instrument, however, this one we just have whole notes. And then we've got our keyboard. Alright, cool. So let's duplicate our keyboard channel again. Let's grab a pad. Now, pads are really cool sounds that basically don't have as much of an upfront timbre, meaning it's not usually a tone that you identify in the front of the mix, but rather something that pads the rest of it. Just like it sounds, it's they're usually soft, they're usually wide. Pretty cool stuff. So let's make sure we're on this channel, or else I was about to change my keyboard sound. I'm going to go into synthesizer, pad. Let's try an analog waves. Cool. Alright. Let's name this. This is our pad. Alright, let's get, how about one other instrument. We'll need a bass in here. So let's go into just bass. Let's hit subby bass. Now, in the future, I'll cover a lot of the third-party plugins that I like to use for my sounds and my sound design. I already did one video on Serum. That's going to be my main synthesizer engine that I'm using to design something like this. But for now, we're just going to showcase Logic's default abilities. And we're going to get this sub ready. Now, one cool thing when you're writing a bass line, you could drag your pad down. You could grab the lowest notes. Because we wrote these chord progressions in root position, these are our bass tones. So just with the whole notes, we've got this. Alright, we're running. Cool, so now that we created a bunch of different layers, we're going to do some arranging. So what's arranging? Arranging is taking parts and putting them in some sort of order. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start with our reversed pluck sound. Now let's also add our actual pad in there too. Now I'm going to lower our pad. What about here, our piano? our sub bass in there. Building some cool energy. Now, this is my favorite part of making house music. Hopefully, some of you don't think I'm crazy for this, but when we add our 4-on-the-floor kick drum onto pretty much anything that's written in time that already has kind of like a cool feel to it, the kick drum is going to serve to add that energy. You could imagine if you've been and watched a DJ perform this music live, or to DJ it live, you'll know the feeling of an ambient texture and then that kick drum just smacking through. It's kind of the really the sound. All right, so let's hear the kick come in. Awesome. Now let's go in here and let's actually automate our different frequencies to come back in. Now the kick, I have a high cut on it, so if I want that to open up or sort of let the kick get brighter, I can alter that line. I'm going to do the same for our low cut, only I'm going to just drop out our low cut the 8 bars after our kick comes in. Let's hear that. Cool. All right, let's give ourselves a little bit more space. Let's now bring in how about we filter in our main arpeggio as our kick starts. So pretty cool. So now, what was I just thinking? We've got our arpeggio. Oh, let's actually filter our arp. Now, this was a patch we drew from, or got from our Logic library. So these sounds all come with a channel strip already. So I do have an EQ up there. So instead of messing with that, I'm going to add another channel EQ at the end of our chain. That's going to make it so we don't alter the sound. We're going to literally filter everything that we heard. Alright, so my step to do this low pass filter is to click the high pass. This filtering thing is backwards. By low pass, we're going to let the low frequencies in. So we're going to automate that high cut to start lower and then open up as we desire. So now that I turned that on, I click A to access automation, go to my drop down menu, choose that 5th plugin, my high, or my EQ, the new one, not the 3rd one, the other EQ, my high cut frequency, and now I can double click and write a line in here. As we hear this pluck come in, we'll probably notice it is got a high cut on it. Cool. So now we're ready to add some other elements in. Now I'm gonna keep let's see, this texture going. With my drums, what I want to do is bring in my hi-hat pattern. So that's this one. Now gotta go to our drop down menu and make sure that our automation is still good. looks pretty good. Let's play with the volume of our hi-hats. Good, I want to go back in there, play with our swing. Make sure you're hitting Command S if you want to make sure you save these. All right, cool. So now we've got a track that's on the way. Now we can basically keep writing elements. I could write a lead in there. I'm probably going to save the melodic stuff for the next section of this video. My recorder that I'm using, I need to up my stream game. My stuff is maxed out right now at 40 minutes, so I got to make sure I save these or break up these sessions into amounts of time that I can actually record a video. All right, now I'm going to write a bass line. Now we already have a bass line in the sense that our bass is playing a line of music, but we're doing something that's kind of not boring, but we're just playing whole note root chords. Nothing super exciting about that. So let's loop an 8-bar or 2-bar sequence, and I'm gonna write a bass line. Now let's start out by doing something that kind of like mirrors our kick drum, 4 on the floor. Now let's start adding some other. Cool. I have a lot of fun writing bass lines. Some of the different elements that I'm thinking about. First of all, the main note that we're using is still the root note of the chord. So we started on a D minor, so I'm playing a D. The other notes that I added, so I added some syncopation in here. Really just from listening to a lot of the style and from knowing the way I like to write bass lines, I think some syncopation allows the bass, and since the kick drum is straight down, the bass being a little syncopated is going to kind of like dance around the kick, give it some cool swing. Then let's talk about these other pitches I added. I went up to an E and down to a B. Now, the reason I chose those notes is I was thinking about using the notes from the key of C major, so our white keys. So I did use white keys. And then past that, I sort of used my ear. The more you program these bass lines, the more you'll know the difference between going up 1 scale tone or 2. Either would work. I just thought it would sound cool to go up the 1 scale tone. Then when we go down, we're jumping down to B. I think that that's kind of a cool note to play on because it's not in the chord, and it thus kind of like stands out a little bit. Cool. So now the next time I do this, I could perhaps change that final note. Let's hear what that sounds like. Cool. We're getting there. Now, what we could do, so in house music, it can be pretty common to have the bass rotate around 1 chord and then essentially have that progression change. So let me show you what it's going to sound like as all of our chords change, but we stay on the same bass line. One important thing to note is that because we're on a D and not on C, the main key that we're writing in, this has the potential to give it a modal feeling. Now, this is kind of a cool thing and something I cover in the book with our bonus keys. So I'm not going to go in depth to that, but you could just think this is going to be a new lens for us to hear or see with our ears these chords. So let's hear what this sounds like. Cool. So next option I have is to follow our bass line a little bit, or our, sorry, poor use of words. Follow our chord progression a little bit more. So we're going D, F, A to C. So I could take, without sliding that off the MIDI channel, I could take the notes that we're playing on D before, move those to an F, move these ones to an A. We can go down, and then finally a C. Now, I didn't change any of our fill notes, so this is one option. Let's hear what this sounds like. Cool. I kind of like these last two. This one, I think it works well, but let me show you how we could change this. One thing I could do is, instead of having the same filler notes as before, I could put these filler notes on their respective same scale tones as they would using the pattern before. So essentially, I go up one scale tone, and then when I go down, I skip a scale tone, right? So that's kind of cool, and then the next time I go down one more. Let's hear what that sounds like. Something about that last note. I didn't like the C, I tried an E. I kind of like it on the D. Let's hear that twice. I know what it was. I changed an earlier note. Cool. I think it works. All right. So about done with where I'm going to leave it today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to loop this bass line over, and then finally we're going to use our last pattern of drums with our snare. Copy these other things over. Make sure we go in and mix our snare a little bit. Cut it a little bit. Now, this is a good example of why I used sample-based drums. We can definitely mix the Epic Electro kit or any of these drum kits and change the sounds tremendously. However, it's always easiest to start with a sound that's already really close to what you like. So I highly recommend you start collecting drum samples in the area of music that you like. So by following a lot of your favorite producers, a lot of producers are putting out free and for sale sample packs. There's some cool VSTs, third-party VSTs out there that are slightly closer to commercial or closer to record ready at producing drum sounds. And then there are companies out there that primarily make samples. A lot of my students are using Splice right now because Splice is a really cool way of getting single samples at a time, and you can audition a lot of them in your session. I don't currently use Splice because I have quite the arsenal of samples I've just collected over the years. So I'm not going to use those now, but what I would do if I were trying to make this as good as I can get it is I would start to replace drum sounds. a lot of times when I'm working, I will use default Logic instruments just to get the ball rolling. But as I get further along, I'll perhaps go and find samples that better fit the vibe of what I'm doing. Cool. So I think we came up with a track here that it's nothing revolutionary, but again, my goal is to just showcase some of Logic's functions, their instruments, and then also put to practice some of these music theory principles that I talk about in my book, Music Theory for Electronic Producers. Again, it's linked below. I would be honored if you got it, and please let me know if it helps you out in your production journey. All right, thanks a lot, everybody, for checking this out. I'll be back with a part 2 where I write a melody, cover some mixing, perhaps go into some of the more common elements to a style like this, like perhaps a break and a true build-up. But for now, this will be a good place to return to. So let's listen to what we created here from the beginning, and let's turn off our metronome so that we can hear it more like we would as an audience member. Amateur hour here. Anybody notice those pop sounds? If you didn't hear them, always be careful for these. They come from the fact that I chopped this audio. I'm gonna hit F for my fade tool. If you don't have that key command, go down there to your fade. I'm gonna create a fade on the first 8 of these. Need them at the beginning. Let's hear those correctly. Cool, got rid of those pop sounds. All right, now I want to put these on the rest of the song, so I'm just gonna get rid of all the ones without the fades. I'm gonna grab the ones with the fades, copy them over. All right, there we go. Now let's listen to this. Should sound a lot better without the pop sounds. Bass line. So, again, nothing super fancy, but it's the beginning of a track, and hopefully this gets you motivated to get into whatever DAW you're using, whether it's Logic or something else, and just get to writing. The more you use your program, the better you get, and the closer we are to being able to make whatever sound we can imagine. One thing I did notice listening back, I don't know if you picked up on this, but the level of swing in our hi-hats, since I went back and changed it in this parameter, has actually changed. So the swing gets bigger when our snare drops in. So I could go in and match this number to this number. Looks like it is matched. Well, I heard them change. But anyway, we'll adjust that when we open this back up for the first time. Alright, so before my video ends abruptly, I will sign off now. My email is below, as with the textbook link. Feel free to send me any questions. If you use this video to make a house beat or any sort of track that you're proud of, please send it my way. I'd love to hear what you guys are making, and eventually I'd love to start doing some success videos where I showcase the work of all my students all around the world. So anyway, cheers. I'll see you guys tomorrow with part 2. Till then.